So there are parties that use the word socialist, and they mean, well, socialist on the way to communist. Yeah, you can't say those words, the meanings are so tied in with what period in history and what the person using it means that don't try to give an absolute rendition of it. What we say is socialist. I can say I'm a socialist, but I didn't support the Vietnam War, so it's a very different thing.
Well, you're not a socialist then, right?
Well, but if you look at Marx, Marx's writing was that socialism was the first stage on the way to communism. It wasn't the entire thing, it was just the first phase of that. A lot of the countries call themselves the
Socialist republics.
Socialist Republic. Yeah, don't try to give an absolute meaning. We should never do that. You got to talk more deeply to people.
Well, just for the record, I disagree with that, but you go to G.
What is the word democrat? Hold your thought. The word democratic. What is dictatorship? Are you for dictatorship? Well, depends what you mean. Dictatorship of the capitalists over the working class and the oppressed people? We're not for that. But if we had a government, if the workers seized power, and or let's take Lincoln. Lincoln was leading the armies against the slave-owning South. Whatever his personal ideas are, he carried out dictatorial policies. He suspended habeas corpus because it was necessary as a war measure. So there is a dictatorship. Lenin and Marx wrote about the dictatorship of the proletariat because it was saying that if you have a government and you have opponents who are trying to restore the old order, counter-revolution, you can't do it by persuasion. Sometimes you have to use dictatorial means to suppress the minority and when the workers are in charge. So words like dictatorship, democracy, they mean different things to different people at different times in history. We could be for dictatorship and democracy at the same time. We want to have a dictatorship against those who would restore, if we were able to take power and run the country for the workers and the poor people. You'd want to be able to have send military units to put down if there were fascist movements or Tea Party movements or armed uprisings in Wall Street. At the same time, you'd want workers and poor people's democracy. They wouldn't be contradictory. A lot of this stuff has never, contradictions are okay. Things that are contradictory can be also unified on a higher level. And that's one of the things that Marx showed in his philosophy. But Gene, you had a question. Hi?
Isn't fascism a cult? Or is it only the German style fascism?
We got a couple of chairs over there, guys.
Well, let's get into that when we do some of the readings here. But to answer your question, it's not a cult. It is a mass movement by people who are very upset. And we're going to see that this good evening. Yeah, there's plenty of chairs, so
Just grab them, move around, and join in.
settle in. So, again, it may have a leader, a leading figure, but so do a lot of socialist movements, so do a lot of democratic, capitalist movements have leading figures. But it's not predominantly a cult. It is a real mass movement. Pardon?
Don't you think Hitler's Germany
No,
was a
it
cult?
wasn't. It wasn't a cult. They may have whipped it up as that, but fundamentally, Mussolini, Hitler, they led a mass movement of people who were very upset, and they were upset at being impoverished. So they were not rich people. That's your question. Were fascist, unhappy capitalists? No, they were middle and lower middle class people, shopkeepers, artisans, who had been ruined by inflation, by the loss of jobs and the economic collapse. And they were totally ruined. I mean ruined. They were losing their homes. But they didn't try to unite with the working class, the workers who were also losing their homes and losing their jobs and losing their income. They formed a movement to turn against the workers in Germany, the Jewish people. It's similar to poor whites in the South. Now, what they should have done, any poor white in the South, I'm talking about decades ago, maybe even today, but was unite with the African American people, right? They all had nothing, so they had 10 cents and the African Americans had 2 cents. But they were poor, and instead they were able to be diverted and use their anger not against their common enemy in Wall Street or the plantation owners, but use them against the workers, the oppressed people, the African American people. And I think when we read through this, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, to call it a cult sort of sounds like, well, it's Jim Jones. And no, this was a millionfold. Hitler got 13 or 11 million votes just before he seized power.
Wow.
11 million votes. That is a mass movement. Yes. And but he still couldn't gain power legally. He still had to seize power. Because the socialists and communists, two big left-wing parties, had more votes. They had 13, 14 million votes together. But they were fighting each other instead of fighting him. We'll talk some about that. And for those who just came in, I welcome you. We did have a little discussion about what socialism and communism were, the ideology of the working class, developed in the 1800s, into the 1900s, and even continues today. With distortions in Russia, where Stalin was able to consolidate his power and carried out a lot of repressive regimes. But that is not the nature of communism or socialism, and it's not an essence of it. In other words, there are other socialist countries like Cuba and the beginnings in Venezuela where they're very open. They do not use the kinds of repressions that Stalin resorted to, and that was a historical development that came out of many facts of the Russian Revolution, the invasions that took place, and the poverty of that country. So, socialism and communism are the ideology for working and poor people to take control of everything in the country because we built it all.
Yeah.
And we should run it for ourselves. And we don't need Wall Street, we don't need the banks and the corporate heads, or the billionaires who are in hiding. We don't see them, but America's 60 families.
The Federal Reserve.
Well, not even that. I'm talking about the Rockefellers, the ones who live on the Riviera. We don't even see them. They don't even play a role anymore.
Right.
But fascism was a movement which used repression, but it used repression to save capitalism. Communism is a movement to overturn capitalism for something that will benefit us. Fascism is out to destroy us if and when it is seen. Debbie, we'll take a few more questions, then we'll maybe go to the readings, which I think will stimulate a lot of discussion.
Well, I think.
And there's pizza there. I'm sorry, it's pizza and pop for anybody.
I think a lot of what you're saying, it just harks back to the one thing that always sticks in my mind, to show the relationship between capitalism and fascism, is that in 1936 in Germany, when all this was going on and Hitler was consolidating his power, an acknowledgement of this and the fact that his this movement was really assaulting the working class, was that he was Man of the Year on Time magazine in the U.S. precisely because of his activities against the working class in Germany. So I see what you're saying, and that's the relationship that I want to focus on. This relationship that is clearly one between capitalism and an extreme repressive movement in defense of capitalism. So people understand, because like you said, we can see a tiny bit of that in the Tea Party movement of today. But we're not talking about that right now, but I'm just saying that it's important for people to know where what this history is all about. And while they went to war against Germany, they certainly didn't hesitate to applaud Hitler in his assault against the working class in Germany.